Hi, people. After a long time, we're back with hashtag Keep the Flame Alive. It's been a long hiatus, mainly because we've been back to training. I've been busy, but I also kind of lost the mojo a little bit. So hopefully with me, I have Louise Mullany, who will help me get that mojo back. Louise, rather than say what we're going to be talking about, can you tell us about the book? And that'll be a good lead into what this is about.
Sensei. So hi everyone, I'm Louise Mullany from Nottingham in the UK. I work at the University of Nottingham as well as being a student of Aikido at the Eagle Dojo in Nottingham. And I'm currently writing a book called The Science of Politeness. And it's going to cover a whole range of different settings, from workplaces, looking at healthcare, public health messaging, particularly on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic that we're just coming out of. It's also going to be looking at communicating across different cultures. What happens when communication goes wrong? So what happens when impoliteness and rudeness occur? How can these be rectified? I'm also looking at swearing. There's a chapter on swearing in there and how attitudes to swearing have changed over time. I've got a chapter called Are Women Really More Polite Than Men? And then we've also got elements where we're looking at the language of sport, leisure and recreational activities as well. So trying to cover all of the different aspects of people's lives. And it's a book of general interest for members of the public who aren't university students, who are interested in language and communication across a whole range of different fields.
Okay, so I take it back, people. This is not going to be an interview. We're going to have a conversation. Louis is going to pick my brain. There's not much to pick, but it's going to pick my brain, and I'm going to ask her questions as well. What you said, that let's start with swearing.
Yes.
Robert Mustard Sensei would get a big go in that one. Yeah, but anyway, he'd be a big part of that chapter. What has swearing got to do with politeness or being impolite? What's the big deal?
It's a really good way to gauge what's happening in society in terms of where boundaries are crossed. And there's a lot of difference in the research in terms of age in particular. Certain generations of people may find swearing or particular swear words that weren't around when they were younger more offensive. And research has shown in different countries that swearing has become more commonplace as workplaces and other environments have moved more towards a less hierarchical setting. So there's a lot of evidence that shows that workplaces now are a lot more informal than they were 30, 40, 50 years ago, where you had a boss at the top of the hierarchy and workers, and very much in terms of kind of manufacturing industry, workers did what they were told, basically. Now there's more a sense of being able to discuss things, collaborate more. There's a lot of emphasis on working as a team and involving everybody and making sure everybody's had their say. And as part of that bigger picture, more informal language, so language that's more frequently associated with more domestic settings or friendship groups or social groups, has tended to permeate its way into different environments. And swearing is a really interesting one because it tends to be associated with different groups, and quite often it can be used as a key form of showing solidarity with one another, showing that you're part of the same team, that you've got the same kind of membership. Other people might use it to shock or to cause offense. It very much depends on context. If you're, engaged in a fight in the street and people are swearing at one another, that's very different from if you're sitting in a cafe, for example, with your friends and you're engaging in informal conversation where everybody feels safe. But swearing might occur in both of those situations. So it partly depends on how the swearing's delivered as well. So you might get...
Is all that a reason for swearing or an excuse for swearing?
Swearing has always been around, regardless of what people might think as a kind of perception. Swearing's always been there because it's a way in which we can show lots of different emotions. So swearing is a way that's quite powerful form of discourse styles that we can use that show people how we're feeling.
But it's not always okay, though.
No, it's not always okay, and that's why people have to be very careful where they swear and who they swear with. And, you know, in some settings, it can also be illegal as well. So there's a lot of processing that we have to do when we swear or when we engage in swearing that tells us about how appropriate or inappropriate it is and what boundaries have been crossed.
So when you say it's illegal in some settings, is it?
I think it can be if it comes along with, say, for example, if it comes along with verbal threats, or if it's antisocial behaviour on the street, or public order offences, where part of the public order offence would be swearing or threatening somebody, or as part of.
But there's a difference between swearing at someone and swearing. Swearing at a police officer can be a crime, or but swearing in itself is not.
That's right. And it depends on how you're swearing as well. So how is the swearing delivered? So linguists call these the kind of paralinguistic features that go along with the way that you communicate. So it will be things like, you know, are you shouting at the top of your voice? You know, are you really being that aggressive? What kind of pitch are you using? The intonation that comes along with the swearing will tell you the level of verbal aggression that's present. And the language that goes along with the swearing will also tell you, is this humour? Is this banter? Is it someone telling a joke? Is it someone saying something because they're trying to be funny? Or is it something that's very verbally aggressive and confrontational, you know, and could result in violence as a consequence? So there are lots of different scales of swearing.
Right. From here on in, you're gonna have to dumb it down because you're talking to martial artists.
Yes.
Use small words and speak slowly. That's mainly that's for me, not for other people. There's a thing where, you know, there's a big thing now where people say, I take offense at something, right? And most people laugh at that. When I was growing up, if someone said, I take offense at that, they either backed away and left, or you backed away. It wasn't just a statement, it was a clear definition, clear line. But now that word offense is almost, it's parodied. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, because you talked about swearing and giving offense. Yeah. And they say offense is never given, it's taken. And I find that word offense very strong, because that's where I was brought up. If someone said, I take offense at that, then I either apologize and walked away, or I tell them, fuck off, put up, or, you know. But now it's bandied around and it's lost its venom, if you want.
And I think what you said there about you either apologized if somebody said, I've taken offense, is one of the ways in which it's still dealt with now, that there's a sense that I've taken offense at this, therefore you need to offer me something in repair because you've offended me. It's one of those very clear signals that a boundary has been crossed and that something has gone way too far and that offense has actually been taken. So the question is what happens next? Does the situation stop?
Or is the question is that word is used too lightly?
In terms of how it's changed its meaning?
Yeah, or in the way people... when I was growing up, the word offense, if someone said, I take offense, that was either a threat or a warning. And now it's just like, you've hurt my feelings. I'll go sook in the corner, you know? It was once a very powerful word. And if you think twice about offending someone because of the strength of that word, and is that lost now because of social media, where I can offend you from behind my armor, which is a keyboard? I don't know, I'm just fishing here, help me out.
I think that with social media, what's happened there is that the boundaries have changed so much that people are very, very offensive to one another. You know, it can be very aggressive. And like you say, they can hide behind their keyboard. A lot of the time when things get really nasty on social media, we don't even know who we're interacting with. And those boundaries get crossed very, very quickly. And things escalate really quickly. And one of those questions is, would you say what you're saying on social media, would you say it to somebody's face? If the answer to that is no, then you need to think really carefully about what you're writing down. You might not necessarily know who the other person is. You might get involved in a discussion that has gone in one direction, but you don't have all of that information. And a lot of researchers looked at what happens when people are verbally threatened, when illegal activity takes place, and there has to be intervention that comes in to say this is more than offence. This is actually illegal behaviour. And I think you're right that the term, oh, I'm offended by that, that's offensive, has lost that initial, you've crossed a boundary, so you stop now. I think that doesn't happen anymore, because there's much more, I guess there's much more fluidness between the boundaries of how we communicate with each other, and we can communicate in all of these different ways.
I'm going to go back to what you started with, and that's, if you don't know who you're talking to, you might want to be careful of what you say. In martial arts, you always taught awareness, and you always thought about who you're dealing with. And whether it's on social media or not, you need to know who you're talking to before you say what you want to say. And you want to be careful. If you don't know, if you can't do that, you don't know yourself, neither do you know the other person. You want to be very careful about what you say and who you say it to. And yeah, rule of thumb, if I was going to try and muscle someone, I'd want to know I can do it. And if I stepped onto the mat and bowed to someone who was 6'8", and whatever's how equally wide, I'm not going to try and muscle him. Yes. Like on social media too, find out who you're dealing with and then speak appropriately. I've had friends of mine who are really, really prominent in martial arts, really good, and they've been disparaged by people who don't know what they're talking about and have no right to question. And these guys have just said, no, it's not important, it's okay. It says more about the person slinging the mud than the who's wearing the mud, I think.
Yes,
if that makes sense. Now, martial arts, for me, it's steeped in etiquette. And for me, I think that if martial arts, Budo is a way of being, then etiquette is learning how to be. It's the guidelines on how to be. And I think that people don't get that. They don't get that. Before we started recording, I think you said something about etiquette on and off the mat.
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate, or did you want to ask me something about that? I'm leading you here.
Yes. I think that one of the interesting distinctions that sometimes you find, and something that I'm exploring in the book, is you'll get some people that have a very set way of thinking about the dojo, and that when they're on the mats, it's one thing, and when they're off the mats, it's another thing. And for me, it's the same thing. I think the things are blurred, but there might be people, say, for example, that will call sensei on the mats, and then the moment they step off the mats, will go back to normal first name. And
what's wrong with that?
To me, and to a lot of other people, I think that's a breach of etiquette. I mean, it's kind of up to them. They can, do that if they want to, but if you see martial arts and martial arts etiquette as something that affects everything, it doesn't make a difference if you're on the mat or if you're off the mat. That person is still sensei and still your sensei, and that respect should remain there, in my view, and in the view of I think in the view of how I'd like to write the book up as well, is looking at what makes a good martial artist in terms of etiquette, what makes an authentic martial artist, or somebody that is there and represents everything, I guess, that the traditions of Aikido represented originally. Okay,
so before I give you my two Bob's words,
yes.
They say, why do a martial art if you can't take it out of the dojo?
Yes.
Right? How would that apply to someone in the medical profession? If I call you doctor outside, in the hospital, do I then pay you the same deference and call you doctor outside?
I guess it depends on what relationship you have with that person. If you have a formal relationship, then maybe you would. What tends to happen, I guess, outside of a martial arts environment, is that the more you get to know somebody, the person in power may say, don't call me doctor, please call me Joe or Jim or whatever it happens to be. And the person in charge, the person with the power and with the social status, with that honorific, has the right to remove it and say, actually, it's fine. I don't want to be called Dr. such and such. Please, I feel more comfortable if you call me this. Now, I've heard that from some senseis where they've said, oh, don't bother with that, call me this. And I think that if you are the person that has the power and want to do that, that's fine, that's okay. But I think that when you're the person that doesn't have the power and you make that decision and you make that shift, that says something about you. And that says something about your attitude to how you view the art, and you view it as something that's not there throughout the rest of your life. It's something that you come and do maybe once a week on a Saturday and then disappear again. And the moment you leave the mats, you get out of that headspace and you leave it behind at that particular point. So that etiquette and respect is not following you through the rest of, not even just coming in and out of the dojo, but the moment you're off, that's it, you're done.
And is that important?
I think it's important to the etiquette of martial arts, but different people come to the dojo for different reasons. And I don't want to say, well, you can't come to the dojo if you don't call sensei outside of the mats, because some people just won't, and they may be coming to the dojo for different reasons. But coming back to that kind of sense of what makes a legitimate student or a really good student, I think that there would be certainly from the senior instructors in our dojo that I know, when somebody does that, it really, really annoys them, and they see it as disrespectful towards their sensei and something that shouldn't really happen. But it does happen, and people will do it, and people have done it.
Yeah, you could write a whole book just about this. Yes. For me, the etiquette in the dojo and outside the dojo, it's almost like a prison, and depends on which angle you choose to look at it from. Yes. The foundation of etiquette is something that has to come from the person offering that bit of respect. Whether it's senior or junior, it's not demanded, it's given.
Yes.
And if you don't give that freely, I guess there's something about you. No one worth his salt has ever demanded to be called a certain thing. I know people who have, but they're fucking hopeless, right?
Yes.
So anyone I know who I've respected has never demanded respect. They've earned it, and they've carried themselves very well, whether you call them by their first name, their last name, or by the honorific. They'll treat you the same, but that says something about you and how you choose to treat someone who's you're better. And I'd use that word. Yeah. One guiding light in this is, what is your connection to that person?
Yes.
The connection to that, if I go out in a dojo setting, the connection, once we're outside, is not that glass of beer. It's the fact that I'm here sitting with you because of Aikido. Yes. That forms the basis of our relationship. There's people I've known for as long as Robert Mustard, and I will call them so-and-so sensei.
Yes.
Because that's the basis of our relationship. Whereas Robert Mustard and I, the basis of our relationship is a friendship. We have a professional relationship too, so that friendship overrides things.
Yes.
And if you don't know that, what that core element is in your relationship to the other person, then you haven't got a clue as to who you are.
Yes.
It's really, really, really important. And etiquette for me is like sweeping the mats. Yes. It's, if you want to do it, you do it. If you don't want to do it, don't. And people will call me Joe on the mats, off the mats. I will still teach them because I've taken their money and I'm honor bound and duty bound to teach them.
Yes.
But the people who do show the proper respect, and I'm not talking about false kind of etiquette. I'm talking about etiquette from the heart. These people tend to learn and exemplify Budo more than most people. So you could learn all the techniques well, but you'll never be a Budoka unless you understand etiquette.
Yes.
It's one of the most important things. In the old days, to quote Obata Sensei, etiquette was not just a way of being, it was a way of not getting killed.
Yes.
Because if you walked into a setting and you did the wrong thing, offended the wrong person, you'd lose your life. So it was a way how to not die. It's a way to how to conduct yourself appropriately. And in this day and age, it helps you to be accepted. And yes, martial arts are very hierarchical. Yes, it's but so is etiquette, so is respect. That hierarchy teaches you where you are and gives you a starting point. It doesn't say you're there all the time. But from I've seen though, from a teacher's point of view, some teachers have treated their students the same from the word go. And I think that's wrong. I've had people here who have trained as kids. And when they became teenagers, I treat them as teenagers. When they became adults, I treat them as adults. And now I treat them as equals. They don't treat me as an equal, but I treat them as an equal. So it's the same. You know, I've taught people, I can use John Marshall as an example. As a child, a 10-year-old, he started. And as he went through the ranks, I treated him like a brown belt, like a black belt, as an instructor. And now he's a Shihan, and I treat him as an equal, but he doesn't treat me as an equal.
Yes.
And I think if you don't understand the nuances of that relationship, you don't get what Budo is about.
Yes.
And I think that can flow onto all other aspects of life as well. As you get older, your parents treat you differently, but you still respect them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, tirade over. Now, have you got any questions?
I've got a question about etiquette on the mats in terms of things that are often commented on at summer school and in normal classes as well, in terms of what I would call the kind of norms of talk or conversation, and about when they're crossed, and what to do in those kind of situations. So, for example, if people are trying to teach you or talking while they're training, and quite often in seminars, it's made very clear that if that happens, you're not going to get any tuition, you're not going to get taught. What happens in those kind of situations? Like, what kind of how do you respond to that? You know, and I think that sometimes people may challenge a sensei or a senior instructor on the mat, either verbally or physically. They may challenge and cross that boundary, cross that etiquette boundary quite dramatically, and people around can see that. And I guess what are your thoughts on that? How to respond to that? You know, what happens in those kind of situations?
Yeah, that's a good question. But that would depend on the people involved.
Yes.
And in the circumstances, right? I've had, when I was in my 30s and 40s, I had 50 and 60-year-old women trying to teach me what to do.
Yes.
I just smile and don't train with them again. I'll finish training with them and I'll move on. And I've had big guys try and tell me what to do, and then that I would treat differently. If someone challenged me physically, I would treat it differently as if someone challenged me technically.
Yes.
Yeah. So does that make sense? I mean,
yes.
it'd be silly if you challenged me and said something about what I said and said, you know, that's wrong or whatever, or you're belligerent. I'm not going to put your head into the mat, right? But if Matt did it, yeah, I put Matt's head in the mat. Maybe I'm being sexist, but Matt would do it. Not that Matt would do it, but you know, some big bloke would do it differently. They wouldn't use words. They would use their muscle. And I'd answer in kind. But that, again, I have to say, everything depends on the situation, the circumstances. And just like we treat everyone in the dojo differently, I would treat that sort of belligerence differently. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had people say to me, no, that's not the way I was taught. This is the way I was taught. Like,
Yes.
okay, that's fine. That's what you want. Then keep going. You've paid your seminar fees. I don't mind. In my dojo, no one ever says that.
Yes.
If you do, then it's time for you to leave. I've had a guy once before said to me, "Oh, I saw a video of Chida Sensei and he teaches this technique differently from you." And I said, "No, he doesn't." He said, "Yes, he does." And I said, "Okay, I'll take your word for it, but this is my dojo. You do it the way I do."
Yes.
And then someone asked him for the video. I wasn't interested. Someone asked me the video, and that person said, "That's exactly the way we are taught as well." So I don't know what he was smoking, but
Yes.
I don't know. I didn't feel the need to smash him on the head or whatever. Maybe I should have, but I can just say, no, this is what we're doing. This is my dojo. Do it. So everyone's different, and yeah. Louise, is lying an important part of etiquette?
Well, that's a good question.
I got lots of good questions.
Lying to protect somebody, or lying in what way would it be?
There's so many lies, right?
Yes.
But they say one lies when you're afraid of something, afraid of hurting people's feelings. You're afraid of consequences, whatever. But we lie because we're afraid. Is it okay?
In terms of, I guess I'm trying to think about separate it out from kind of dojo etiquette to normal etiquette. I think that lying is a part of life, and it's something that everybody will do from time to time. And there's kind of scales of little white lies through to big whopping, chunky lies. I guess there's a sense of dojo etiquette around morality and respect, and that comes along with that kind of idea of telling the truth and being honest with each other and being honest with people that you're teaching, and not saying, oh yeah, you're great, you're great next week, when people are miles and miles away from doing that. But is there a sense in terms of I guess protecting people if they are afraid of something, or I guess it's working out why someone's lying as well. Why are the lies being told? Are the lies being told because somebody's afraid of telling the truth? Are the lies being told because somebody's trying to hide something that they desperately don't want other people to find out?
So
I don't know.
Yeah, look, sometimes blurting out the truth can be shattering. Yeah. And I'm thinking from a martial arts point of view.
Yes. Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you want people to keep coming, and you want people to keep training. And like you say, people have come and they've paid. There are different. I know from like learning and doing courses at work in terms of teaching and learning, people will have different styles of learning and teaching. Of course, all this, and people will be motivated in very different ways. So, is it the right thing to blurt out, that was absolutely dreadful, try again, to be really honest with people? Or is it better to find a kind of softer way of saying things, or delivering, I guess, thinking about delivering criticism or trying to get people to improve technique? Different things would work better on other people.
So here's another question to follow that up, right? What's the ultimate in martial arts? The ultimate the ultimate goal in martial arts?
Well, I think that depends on who you are and why you're coming along. I think for a lot of the people that I train with, I don't want to kind of speak for them, but the sense that I get is the ultimate goal is self-improvement and finding a different way to live your life that aligns really neatly with what you would think about when you think about politeness. So things like harmony with one another, thinking about being considerate to other people, showing each other respect, having a sense of morality or a sense of civility and appropriateness, but I don't want to paint a kind of utopian picture, because that's not where we live and that's not how the world is. And inevitably there will be conflict and there will be disagreement amongst people, and there will be times, you know, where people really fall out. We can't live our lives in a bubble. But I guess the test there is what happens in that situation, and how quickly can you repair a relationship if it's worth repairing? How quickly can you resolve?
Digressing now.
From the dojo?
No, from the ultimate gain.
The ultimate goal. Yeah. So I guess if you have that as your ultimate goal, some kind of sense of self-discovery, self-improvement, then the language that you learn and the way that you show dojo etiquette through different rituals or different ways in which you perform all of those different techniques feed into that ultimate goal.
Okay, I'll simplify it for you. In traditional old school martial arts, the ultimate goal was to kill the ego.
Yes.
Like you said, to better yourself. So in the old ways was to kill the ego. And a sure way of not killing the ego was to flatter someone or to tell them they're doing good. So we were never told we did any good. If anything, we were told it's rubbish, 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 rubbish. And one day you stop being told anything.
Yes.
You were never flattered. You were never told lies, because it was about killing the ego.
Yes.
And before you built the person, you killed the ego first, and then you built the person the way they saw fit. Telling lies doesn't contribute to that.
Yes.
So should we be brutal, or should we tell lies for the sake of etiquette and for the sake of fostering a bigger dojo?
Yes. Again, that depends on I guess what kind of students you want in your dojo. And if a lot of dojos will have a mixture of people, but I guess if you go down the traditional route, that will attract certain kinds of people, and you'll hang on to those kinds of people and get a more traditional dojo by following that traditional path and that traditional route. If you don't do that and you want to grow numbers, then you probably would need to pander more towards people's sense of I think you quite often hear people say, I don't understand what I did wrong, or what people will be hurt or potentially upset. But then is that not the martial way? Does that show that Budo isn't the right choice or the right path for that particular person?
I think a good dojo has a whole plethora of people who come for different purposes.
Yes.
And I think it's integral. And a good teacher can have different students within that same dojo. Ones that he is absolutely harsh with, or her, yes, very harsh with. Others that they're not so harsh with, and others they're totally casual with. I think a good dojo needs all that, just like society needs all that. It'd be very boring if we all walked around like etiquette Nazis, wouldn't it?
Yes, indeed.
So I think again, the etiquette is a way of being, and it for me it's not just in the dojo, it's the outside as well. And I don't always succeed, but I try and carry that through. I try and be respectful to people, but I will also hold my ground when I need to.
Yes.
Next question. Anything?
Yes, I have a question about which one should I pick? How about banter on the mats? What's your view of where banter sits?
I think it's okay in small doses.
Yes.
I think if you just serious all the time, you get tense. A little bit of levity, a little bit of a joke, that's fine. But if you're laughing, giggling, and carrying on through the whole class, you ain't got it, and you ain't going to get it either. There has to be that switch on, switch off. I can have a laugh and then become serious again. And if you can't, then you have to learn it.
Yes.
having said that, we all can. You could be having a drink with a friend, and then your child does something wrong, and you just glare at them, and then you're laughing with your friends again. We can all do that. It's just that in the dojo we choose either to have a good time or to be too serious. If someone's too serious, yeah, I want them to chill out a bit. If someone's too chilled, I want them to be more serious. So it's like Ben Harper said, some people should smoke a little more and some people should smoke a little less.
Yes.
So I'm trying to find that balance. Banter is important, a bit of levity is important too, but I think sometimes it goes way too much.
Yes.
I think it gets out of hand, and again, people forget why they're there. Both teachers and students forget why they're there. Students are there to learn. Teachers are there to impart knowledge. But in doing so, you have to understand that it costs time, money, and effort for people to come to the dojo, to do a seminar, time away from your family, money that could be spent elsewhere, and effort. And you have to respect that. You can't be there talking about bullshit and just carrying on talking about yourself and the people around you. You need to teach, so I've heard of teachers who talk about aliens and spaceships and stuff like that, or bring religion onto the mat as well, and that's fine. But students need to know that, hey, I'm not going back again.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's an important part, I think. While we're on this subject, something that's really close to my heart, and it's loyalty. For me, loyalty and etiquette go hand in hand.
Yes.
They're almost two wings of the same bird. And in martial arts, loyalty to your teacher is really, really important. It's supremely important. Loyalty to the art is also important. And one day, and this is what I tell all my instructors, one day, if I have a problem with you, then it's up to you to try and reconcile that. Yes. and stay loyal to me. But if you get to a point where you can't be loyal to me anymore because it conflicts with your loyalty to the art, then you must pick loyalty to the art over the teacher. So if tomorrow I start doing no-touch Aikido and throwing people across the room, then you need to say to me, hey, stop doing that. And if I don't, then you need to say, thank you very much for our association and look after the art. Because if you follow a person blindly, that will be the end of you and the end of the art form. So etiquette's important, looking after your teacher is important, being loyal to your teacher is important. But when the teacher starts doing bullshit, then loyalty to the art must take precedence.
Yes.
Right. All right. So I've got a question for you.
Yes.
And this is not necessarily got to do with etiquette, but since I've got an academic in front of me, you've studied hard, right?
Yeah.
And what do you do at uni?
I teach English language and linguistics and research
your
as
title?
well. I'm Professor of Sociolinguistics.
Okay. And I take it you got a big certificate that says so, and you've been licensed by the government to teach people.
Yes.
What do you think about martial artists who put a shingle up on their door and say, hey, come over, I'll teach you? Doesn't that take a lot of ego?
I think it does take a lot of ego. Yeah.
And isn't that counterproductive to what I said before? Or not counterproductive, but contrary to what I said before?
It's contrary to what you said about ego, isn't it? And about that kind of more traditional practice of breaking the ego and starting again. I guess the kind of process to go through is, who is that person? Have they got the qualifications? How long have they been practicing for?
No. I'm not talking about from your point, from the student's point of view, but from the the person who's put up their
Of
own
the
shingle.
person who's done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been licensed, right? You've gone through a
Yes.
whole process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of us
For
never went
years.
through that process. Yeah. Most of us never went through that process.
Yes.
I put up that shingle when I was 19.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I didn't have anyone who did the Aikido that I was used to doing in Australia. No one did Yoshinkai Aikido. So, yeah. Damn, I'm going to do my own thing. Right?
Yes.
At the age of 19. I was totally hopeless. But that ego said, you want to do it, you're going to have to do it. Yeah.
Yes.
So, is that right? Is that wrong? Like, I feel self-conscious sometimes when martial artists call themselves, Shihan and Soke. And for a start, no one should ever call themselves anything like that. No one. You're a fucking idiot if you do. I'll say that, right? Do not call yourself by a title that people are meant to use on you. Don't confer that upon yourself. Don't use it on yourself. Never. That's my anyway. Okay, so going back to that thing about the ego and saying I'm good enough and I'm going to do it. You guys would never do that in university. You go through a long process. You're vetted, and someone looks over your shoulders. So
doesn't make you
how do you feel about martial artists doing that?
I think that there's, like you say, there's processes and protocols that have to be followed for formal education, but that doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher. And just because you've gone through those processes doesn't necessarily mean the students are going to like you or respect you or get something out of being taught by you, because a lot of what you bring into the classroom is personality based, and you can give 3 people the same curriculum and they'll all teach it very, very differently, depending upon their own personalities or the ways in which they can inspire students to be and to learn. So sometimes, the way to get experience, and this is certainly how I started off first teaching when I was 22. I had no formal teaching qualifications at the time, and I was appointed on a kind of 0 hours, go in and teach these students at a university where all the staff had left. There was nobody else to do it, and I hadn't got a clue what I was doing, and went in and felt so out of my depth and came out and I thought, I'm never going to be able to do this. But then by the experience and the time that it takes, and then once I did go through the formal qualification route to get a full-time kind of proper job, using that like in scare quotes, but get a job where you are fully employed and you can be there as you described at the beginning of the question. That was a long process, but I learned by experience. I learned by being in the classroom. I've been on lots of courses where you talk about teaching styles and you look at pictures of pyramids and look at all these different things. You can't learn how to teach unless you're in the classroom. It's the only way to do it. And you can talk about how you might be challenged or what do you do with a difficult student, but it's not the same as actually physically being in the space and testing yourself to see what happens in that particular environment. So I think learning by experience is the only really way to learn how to teach, if that makes sense.
Yep, it does. And I think what he said can be summed up by someone else I interviewed a year or 2 years ago. And he was talking about art. And he said, if you're seeing the technique, you're not seeing the artist.
Yes.
And I think it's the same as a teacher. If you're seeing, the way they teach, you're not seeing the person. It's one, and I think it's wrapped up one in the same. So yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. But I think martial artists, teachers as well, like a lot of people treat martial arts teachers as demigods, and that's wrong. That is totally wrong. Respect them, but don't treat them as demigods, because you're not doing them any favors. And I don't mind people asking me questions, and I don't mind people questioning me. 5 years on, you can still ask me questions, but you cannot question me.
Yes.
Because 5 years on, if you're questioning me, don't come to my dojo. Ask me questions, but don't question me. I should have proven myself, or you shouldn't be there.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's from martial arts point of view. I think, again, what I said about Budo martial arts, for me, it's a way of being. And so how you conduct yourself as a teacher, as a student, is really, really important. I'll give you an example. My teachers would say something, Inoue Sensei or Chira Sensei, when I was younger, and whether I agreed, disagreed, or was indifferent, I would just say, "Oh," and say, "That's it." Later on, I would say, well, maybe this. Very gently, I'd say, maybe this. And if they engaged me in the conversation, I'd state my point of view very politely. And if they didn't, I'd leave it at that. More recently, I would say, "Sorry, Sensei, I disagree."
Yes.
But I would leave it at that unless they question me. So I think you earn the right to speak up, and you have to exercise that right. You get to a position where your art, your education or something takes you to a point where you then have to look after those people coming up under you. And that's what sensei means. Someone who's born before and who's leading you because they've been there before. And it also means someone who's going to protect you.
Yes.
And not just from, it protect you 360, protect you from other people you're training with, protect you from teachers who might be abusive, protect you in hierarchical situations where the rules of the organization are going against the students. Then you have to speak up. And if you don't, you're not worthy of the title. And I've been polite about it, and I got to a point where I wasn't too polite about it, and then I left because it was not a good organization anymore. Yes. So I put my head on the chopping block because I felt it necessary. And for me, that's etiquette. That's me paying my students the respect that they paid me. And I might be a long bow to draw, but that's the way I see it. Yes. And you earn the right to be called sensei, and you have to exercise that right. And if you don't, you're not worth it. And going on about etiquette and respect, they say a teacher is the only thing in life you truly choose. And it's something you choose every day. One day you think it's not my teacher anymore, you walk away. Or, he was my teacher, is no longer my teacher. But every time you go on the mat, you say, "Yeah, that's my teacher." Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of, we use the word "os" a lot, and it embodies yes, no, maybe. What I think it really means is, I hear you, but I have no clue what you're saying.
Yes. Not that was that us, I'd say.
So, but Darren Friend Sensei once said, when you say "os," you're reaffirming the values of the system of Aikido that you're doing, or the system of Budo that you're doing. You're reaffirming what that stands for. And that makes a lot of sense too. Yeah.
That's really nicely signaled by that switch in language, isn't it?
Yeah. And if you don't understand these things, there's a chapter in Kancho Sensei's Shora Gozo Kancho's book that says the Riai is the heart of the Ryu. Riai means the concepts of the reasoning behind the technique. Yes. They form the basis of that style. And so if you don't understand that basis, you don't understand the style. Then what you're doing is just empty physical activity. Yes. You have to understand where it's coming from and why you're doing it that way. Otherwise, it becomes pretty empty. And it's the same with bowing to someone. You have to understand why you're doing it and what that person means to you. Yes. So in Japan, when you bow, there's different angles, right? If you bow for 15 degrees, it's to someone your own level. 45 degrees is to 15 degrees, someone your own level or a teacher or something. 45 degrees is like to the prime minister.
Yes.
90 degrees is to a shrine, like a, yeah. So there's those little things as well. And etiquette is full of nuances. I will refuse to call some people by their name, even they say, please call me so-and-so, and I'd go, yep, sure, Mr. So-and-so, or Sensei so-and-so, because I use the etiquette to say, no, I'm not your friend.
Yes.
I'm here on business. I'm not your friend. Just like sometimes if I go into an office and I'm really, really angry with what's going on, they'd say, please have a seat, and I'd say, no, I'd rather stand. Just like, please call me Jack, and I'd go, no, Mr. Jones, I'm not going to call you Jack. Or I'll just say, no, Mr. Jones, I want to see this happen. So you can use etiquette in a very polite way, but you can use it to state your case as well.
Yes.
Without having to be rude. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons I like etiquette, because it shows you how to behave without putting your foot in it.
Yes.
The other thing about etiquette, sorry, I lost my train of thought. You have a go.
Just picking up on that, Sensei, because one of the things that I find really interesting is that kind of process of learning etiquette. And when you're a new student or you get new students coming in, quite often you'll get an etiquette guide or a dojo code of conduct or something that lays down, I guess, the very, very bare minimum rules, like come to class on time, don't have long fingernails, kind of things that you need to present your body in a way that's not going to hurt other people, but also shows respect as well. And then there are those kind of unwritten rules that that you absorb over a period of time. And I was really interested to know, to what extent do you think those rules should be taught? And to what extent is it a process of observation that people should, I guess, be aware of and watch others and absorb themselves?
I think nothing about etiquette should be on paper.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, there was no such thing as cut your nails or do this. You learned by example. You looked around and you think, no one's leaning against the walls. I don't lean against the wall. Everyone's sitting up straight. I sit up straight. That person's slouching, but I don't want to do Aikido like that person. That person's sitting straight. I want to be like him. I'll copy him. That person treats the teacher like this. I want to follow that person. Yes. See, no one, very few people, when you come into the dojo, copy the teacher. They copy the senior students. Yes. In how to behave, but also they think that the teacher might be out of their league, so they'll copy the senior students. And that's a good thing to copy. And you must be deaf, dumb, blind, and stupid not to know good from bad. In both in terms of technique and in terms of how you behave. And if you are, it shouldn't take much longer to open your eyes, because pretty soon you're aware of people who just what's the word, sycophants? Yeah, and or people who are genuine. And if you can't do that, then all the guidelines, all the writing, all the teaching ain't going to be any good. I was in Japan in 1983, and I went to my uncle's friend's dojo and stayed there for a couple of days. Then he took me to Yoshinkan. And the first day I was there, he said to me, go around, look around the town, be back by a certain time. We'll go and teach at this dojo. So I said, of course. And I had my bag. He came in, came from the house, he put his bag in the car, and I had my bag, and we drove off. We got out the car. I grabbed my bag, and I stood there waiting for him. He grabbed his bag, walked past me, and he just swung his bag at me. Boof! I caught it, and that was my one and only lesson in etiquette. Yes. I was on the ball. Seriously. Yes. It was what I needed, and I was on the ball. After a few months later, I went to the Yoshinkan for 3 months, then visited his dojo again. There was a demonstration, and after the demonstration, he had guests. Some were top Aikido teachers. There were a couple of judo teachers who were really good, and I was serving them drinks and doing stuff. And he said to the teacher, "Who's this?" And the teacher said, "It's my friend's nephew." And he said, "How long has he been in Japan?" And the teacher said, "Ask him. He can speak Japanese." And he asked me, I said, 3 months. He said, "Where'd you learn how to behave?" I said, "I don't know." And he said, "You really never been here before?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Next time, don't do Aikido. Come, I'll teach you Judo."
Mm.
But it's how you behave that opens the doors to you.
Yes.
And you know, if I needed more that one hit with the bag to wake up, I'd never be any good. That was a lesson, and I can still feel it being hit by that bag. I can still feel it. I've been bawled out other times for doing the wrong thing, but that was the one big thing. Like, wake up, son. Yeah. You're here for a purpose. And I think if we remember our purpose, everything falls into place. I mean, if you need to be told, don't have long fingernails, if you need to be told, don't wear jewelry, then that says a lot. But honestly, I have no problem with people having long fingernails, jewelry, nothing. I've seen more people be hurt on the mat by sheer stupidity and unawareness than fingernails. I've seen people with scratch too, but I've seen so much more done by people who are totally unaware and totally stupid. Yeah. So take your pick. Long fingernails or stupidity. And you can't unteach stupidity. You just can't do that.
Count fingernails.
Yeah. I have another gripe. Yeah.
Yes.
There's a thing now where in some schools of Aikido, I'm not mentioning any, but where you can apply for high downgrades. And people are asking senior teachers to recommend them for them or to give them a high downgrade. One, you never do that. Don't do that. Just never do that. Don't apply. Don't ask. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, go train under a teacher who will see your worth and give it to you. Just don't do that. That's bad etiquette. It's bad everything. And while we're on that, if you respect someone, don't ask them for something where they might have to say no. Because that will spoil that shows total lack of respect, but it also diminishes their authority. They have to say no to you. So etiquette is a really fine thing. Don't ask for something if there's a chance that the answer will be no.
Yes.
Don't do it. If you don't understand what I'm saying, then you don't understand. What can I say? It really, it's in some ways, it's like a father-son relationship. In some ways, it's not. Someone asked Inoue Sensei once, he said, "You were Shiora Gozo Kancho's oldest student, one of his oldest students, longest students. When did you become friends?" And before the translation was done, Inoue Sensei said, "Never." And then he said in Japanese, "We were never friends. He was my teacher." And there was translation was given. And this guy said, "But surely, you became a Shihan really early. And when did you become friends?" And Inoue Sensei said, "Never. He was my teacher, never my friend." I'm sure they got friendly.
Yeah.
They got together, drink together, etc. But there was always a student-teacher relationship. That was the foundation of that's what Inoue Sensei was trying to say. The student-teacher relationship overrode all that years of being together. That never changed. And again, we go back to what I said at the start. What is the basis of your relationship? That should form the way you treat someone. And while we're on this, etiquette and respect is not a dogmatic thing. There are no rules to etiquette, no rules in the dojo, just guidelines. And you can change the guidelines. You can mix them up. I've seen, I sit in Caesar when I go onto the mat and bow. That's what I was taught. But I've seen top teachers just walk on.
Yes.
They've earned the right. They can do whatever they want. Earn the right, then you're okay. In my dojo, sometimes I walk on the mat. Everyone, whether they're in gi or not, always bows. I don't. Earn the right. For me, it's natural. If I'm in my gi, I will bow. If I'm not in my gi, then I stroll around the dojo, remembering also the dojo is my house.
Yes.
Yeah. So different situation again. My students will bow when they walk into my house because it's part of the dojo, and they'll bow not just to me, but I've seen them even when not around. They just go, oh, yeah. It's their respect. It's not something I've told them to do or asked them to do. I've come back sometimes and I've seen students washing dishes in the dojo, and I will only, if it was a student, just a normal student, I'd say no, don't do that. If it was a close student, I'd let it go.
Yes.
So different dynamics, and that again is what forms the basis of that relationship.
Yes.
I'd first shaved my head in Japan, and I was out drinking with Chida Sensei, and he went like this. He says, "Why'd you shave your head?" And I said, I just thought I'd give it a go. And there was one of my students who came from Australia, and we were all a bit drunk, and he touched my head. He goes, yes, but he looks cute. And Chida Sensei grabbed his hands and nearly broke his fingers and said, "He's your teacher. You do not touch his head."
Yes.
It was okay for Chida Sensei, but not okay for the other person. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the way it is. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Do you think the etiquette rules have changed over time, Sensei, from say when you were in Japan or from your uncle's dojo? Can you see quite a difference now from when you started to different practices?
Yeah, I'd like to say no, but yeah, things have changed. But it's not the etiquette; it's the underlying, I want to say tension, but that's not the right word. The underlying feeling behind the etiquette that has changed.
Yes.
So I see stuff now where it's just the form, but there's no substance to that form. And even with the etiquette, it's just going through the motions, and there's no real substance to it. It's hard to. In 1993, I took some students to Japan, and Shoda Gozo Kancho came out from behind his desk, bowed, and I introduced him to my students. And the way he bowed, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, there's so much humility there, right?
Yes.
And then I've seen other people do the same, and it's not the same. So I might be a bit narrow visioned here, because I think there's some schools that have maintained that integrity in etiquette, and some have lost it. But it's that underlying feeling of what's going on in martial arts that have changed, I think. Not the outward, just bowing type thing. Yeah. Yep. And to some extent, things have changed. There's not many dojos that offer like uchideshi type situations. So the number of full-time dojos are going down as well. So that whole dynamic is changing. For the better or worse, I don't know. Being old school, I probably think it's for the worst, but maybe not. Maybe not. Going back to, I've got one final question for you.
Yes.
Being hierarchical, all traditional schools, very hierarchical. The etiquette is enforced a lot. Doesn't it lead organizations or institutions to becoming almost like cults?
That's a really interesting question, because what you've got is I guess a collection of people that have the same shared norms, and people outside have no way of getting in or understanding that. I guess the test is how individuals that are part of that particular group treat people outside of the world, and whether they can see the boundary between belonging to something and being part of something where you all share the same practices, you share the same language, you'll enact the same kind of, you're there with the same kind of rituals in the dojo. But then I guess, how do you treat others outside of the dojo, or people that aren't part of the dojo, that are part of the cult?
Okay, but
is that answering the question?
Yes, it does. But I was thinking from a different point of view, right? That what you said is valid, but because it's hierarchical, and you treat someone with a lot of respect, and you don't question what you're being told. When the person in power does something wrong, then and no one checks them, doesn't that lead to almost like a cult type situation?
I think
you've not do that.
I think you've commented before, Sensei, about blind obedience, and not having that kind of sense of blind obedience, and that there's lines that can be crossed, and keeping a check on that there might be points that come around, say, for example, where you do need to challenge, or you do need to say something. And by doing that, do it within the bounds of the etiquette that you've described, perhaps with, what you're saying with Chida Sensei or with others, where you kind of gone through a sense of 5 years, I couldn't do this, but then 5 years later, I could do that. I guess it's whose role would it be to do that? Would it be senior students that have accrued that kind of time, or can you do it when you're very junior?
I think it would depend on how blatant the transgression was.
Okay.
So if someone in my position touched up a young student, then it wouldn't need another senior student to tell me off.
No.
Everyone should say, no, that's wrong.
Yes.
If it's me being drunk in public, then maybe the top students need to say, hey, you shouldn't be doing that.
Yes.
So I don't know, but I think we don't do that because we're caught up in this sometimes you don't want to rock the boat. Sometimes you just I don't know, but it's wrong, and we need to call it out. We need to call out bad behavior.
Yes, definitely.
And sorry, I lost my train of thought again. Was important, believe me. I've seen situations where people haven't spoken up, and that's not right. Again, you have to look after the people under you as well as above you. You don't just look after your teacher, you look after people who put their trust in you. And that's important. That's really important.
And it's really important.
I don't think you need to be of any great level to be able to say, no, that was wrong. Please don't do that. Maybe you don't want to do it in public, but you can do it in private. Yeah.
Yes.
And we need to call it out. Otherwise, again, the art gets a bad name, the art dies. And I also see a lot of favoritism on the mat.
Yes.
I think we all have favorites, which is fair enough. But I think some teachers let it show too much. And that's wrong. For me, that's a breach of etiquette.
And that's coming back to what we were saying before about what we are taught about teaching and learning. That's one of the kind of key things. Don't let one person dominate, or don't let one person always have, be seen to be your favorite, whether we're, in a seminar discussion and some people are putting their hands up all the time and you're calling on them because they'll say something sensible, or they'll say something that you agree with. it's a question of getting that balance in class as well, isn't it? And making everybody feel like they're worthy and that they are worthy of your attention as well, and that you want to help them, or you want to hear what they've got to say, and they're equally valid.
Yeah, don't get me started on that. We better change subject on that one.
Yes.
Yeah. I think also, and again, this is a pet gripe. A lot of senior teachers say things or do things based on their experience and based on their learning, based on years of practice and what they want. A lot of people just parrot those words, parrot those phrases, and it's not based on anything aside from what you've heard. And I asked in the last seminar, what do you do if you want speed? And someone said, don't use it. And I said, that's a lot of bollocks. You don't know what you're talking about. Tell Usain Bolt not to use speed. The teachers who say it, they have their reasoning. You need to find out that reasoning, not just parrot what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where that cult thing comes in too.
Mm-hmm. And
when growing up, I would look at a teacher and say, I want to do a technique like that. I want to do that like this. I've never, ever in my life thought or said, I want to be like this person. Because as soon as you start to do that, then what other people are doing is invalid.
Yes.
Because you're going to follow this person, and then it becomes like a cult. And then you start to talk like that person, you start to walk like that person, you start to dress like that person. I've seen this, right? If you think, I want to do this technique like him, I want to do this technique like him, all of a sudden your mind's open. You haven't got blinkers on. And is that etiquette? Is that common sense? I don't know. For me, it's one and the same. If etiquette teaches you a way of being, then the way of being is to have an open mind.
Yes.
And often martial arts is, we don't do that. And here's my train of thought that I lost before. Martial arts is not about empowerment. I hate that word. I do not believe in that word. I do not believe anyone can empower you. True power cannot be given, it must be taken. True self-esteem cannot be given, it must be taken. Of course, we can help along the way. But if you want to stand up for something, find your own legs. Don't stand on someone else's shoulders. They might lift you up there, but then you need to stand on your own legs. And if you're going to challenge someone and say, that's wrong, then you have to have strength of conviction, you have strength of character. And that doesn't come from empowerment, because you will not stand up to the person who empowered you. And if they do something wrong, you don't stand up to them because they empowered you. That's a cult. That's wrong.
Yes.
Martial arts builds strong people, doesn't empower people. Might be semantics, but I really believe in this. Because if someone can empower you, they can take it away from you.
Yeah.
So we all need to, like you said before, when I asked you what the goal was in martial arts, to be a better person, to be a stronger person. And etiquette helps us get there, helps us walk the line, and then we start to come into our own. So there's I've used this before. There's a thing in martial arts called shuhari. Have you heard it? So the first part in shu, it's like Shurokan, is to study.
Yeah.
And the best way to study is to copy.
Yes.
Right? In ha, you're starting to understand or master. That's where you start to try and understand what you've copied. You try and master that. And in re, you forget.
Yes.
So you forget what you learned because it becomes you. So sometimes I do a demonstration. People say, how many years, how many weeks did you practice for that demonstration? I say, 40 years.
Yes.
Right? I've never practiced for a demonstration in my life because I can't remember anything. But in reality, yeah, I practiced for 40 years to get to that. So it's not the technique, it's the person that's been honed. So etiquette is something, like I said, you don't, you don't write down etiquette guidelines. You learn by copying. Then you understand what it is you copied. And respect in the dojo is actually taught through, what's the word? You're forced into it, sometimes through fear. But if after 5 or 10 years, you're showing that respect through fear, something's wrong. You should show that respect because you have common ground. And after that, how you are is how you are. You forget the rules. So again, shuhari is this, in etiquette, it's the same. You learn, you understand, you forget because it's you. It's natural. You don't see an 80-year-old teacher bow sometimes when they walk on the mat. They'll just walk on. They've earned the right. It's them. They personify the etiquette. They personify that sense of being.
Yes.
But for me, that's what etiquette's all about.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Shall we wrap it up? Do you have any final words? Or any final questions? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I think we've covered everything, Sensei. That's been brilliant. Yeah, cool. Can't see any more there.
Thank you very much, and thank you for helping me get my mojo back and
yes,
keep the flame alive. Hopefully, no more hiatus. From now on, I'll start pumping them out again. And to everyone who supported Keep the Flame Alive and who've told me how it's helped them over the lockdown, thank you very much. You've kept me going too. Thank you, Louise. It was a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you, Sensei.
Thank you.